Legends and Losers is proudly sponsored by our good friends at NetSuite Oracle. Turbocharge your growth today at netsuite.com/legends. On this episode, how to have an amazing career as an entrepreneur, venture investor, and startup advisor. Blockchain, cloud computing, the Internet of Things, and the future, oh my. And why Silicon Valley legendary entrepreneur turned venture capitalist Duncan Davidson says that today is a lot like 1897. All right. Joey Ramone said, hey ho, let's go. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Welcome to Legends and Losers. Thank you so much for enjoying us, for joining us, and hopefully for enjoying us. This is Christopher Lochhead, your host, and we have a spectacular show today with a man who has had one of the legendary careers in Silicon Valley, Duncan Davidson, multi-time entrepreneur, and now venture capitalist at Bullpen Capital. And his partner, Paul Martino, has been on Legends and Losers as well. And we have an incredible dialogue about blockchain, Bitcoin, IoT, and really the forward-leaning things that Duncan is investing in and participating in. It's a fantastic conversation that I know you will enjoy. If you're a longtime listener, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. And if you're new to Legends and Losers, welcome. And I hope somebody told you. We are not your typical interview show. We are what you could think of as a dialogue show. Our goal is to have authentic dialogues about how to design a legendary business and a legendary life. And what makes us different is we hardly edit the show. We don't cut this shit up and spoon feed it to you. We give you an insight into a real conversation with an amazing person and allow you to kind of come along for the ride. And the experience that we hope you have is an eavesdropping experience on a conversation. I am not a professional host or interviewer or journalist or anything like that. And so the paradigm on Legends and Losers is a couple people sitting down over a beer, a coffee, and having a great conversation and capturing it and sharing it with you. Now, in business, what we're all striving for is growth. How do you drive growth? And to that end, I'm stoked to be part of a new entrepreneur website called growwire.com, which is created and sponsored by our friends at NetSuite. It's a content site, so it's really, even though it's sponsored by NetSuite, it's not NetSuite specific. It's focused on all kinds of information and content around what it takes to grow a legendary business. So I'd ask you to check out growwire.com. And if you're an entrepreneur focused on trying to grow your business, you know that growth comes with a lot of awesomeness and some pains in the keister. And so if you're looking for how to turbocharge your growth and at the same time, how do you scale effectively? According to Brookings Institute, failing to scale is one of the number one causes of failure overall for businesses. And so NetSuite is the cloud platform for business management for growing entrepreneurial businesses and organizations. NetSuite allows you to take your game to the next level. And for smaller companies, really allows you to level the playing field. NetSuite is part of Oracle, and Oracle is one of the largest technology companies on the planet. And, you know, for the last really 20 years or so, cloud technology and internet technology have been helping to level the playing field for small entrepreneurial organizations to compete and win against the big guys. And that's what NetSuite allows you to do, a cloud platform for running every part of your business, from finance, distribution, commerce, and even HR. You get real-time visibility into all areas of your business. Where's your cash flow? What's going on? Are you hitting your targets? And so if you want to run your business in the cloud, from your desktop, your laptop, and from your smartphone, then you need NetSuite. Now, for Legends and Losers listeners, our friends at NetSuite are offering a free hour of growth consulting. You can book a time, go to netsuite.com/legends, book a time to meet with a NetSuite growth expert and do some brainstorming and look at where the barriers to your growth might be, opportunities for growth, and they'll help you get a sort of a new plan, a new outlook on your growth strategy. So check out netsuite.com/legends and schedule your free growth review with a NetSuite expert today. netsuite.com/legends. Now, Duncan Davidson. He's a serial entrepreneur. That means he's done it many, many times. He was the founder of Covad Communications, a independent DSL provider that went public and reached a $9 billion market cap. Back when getting to a $9 billion market cap was hard. It's still hard today, but it was harder back in the day. He's also a co-founder of Sky Pilot Networks, a developer of outdoor wireless systems that was acquired by Trillium. And he was the senior vice president of BizDev at Intertrust and was there for the IPO in 1999 and secondary. And they also achieved at its height at Intertrust a market value of about $9 billion. He spent a few years as a managing director at Vantage Point Ventures, where he focused on digital media and telecom investments. And today he's the co-founder of Bullpen Capital. Like I mentioned, Bullpen's Paul Martino, who's been on Legends and Losers, an incredibly smart guy, one of the smartest guys I know, as is Duncan. He focuses today on investments in SaaS, blockchain, and Internet of Things, or IoT for short. He has an undergraduate degree in physics and math from Brown and a JD, magna cum laude from the Michigan Law School. He's an incredible entrepreneur turned venture capitalist. Here he is on Legends and Losers, Duncan Davidson.
I'm immersed in the world of blockchain ICOs. So I was giving a speech recently, and I introduced it by saying I had 2 IPOs in the 90s. One of them I did the public offering. I love a bubble. It's back! And so everybody laughed. It was a good way to start.
And so is that really how it feels for you in the blockchain space?
I was on a panel a couple days ago up at the 500 Startups Northern office in San Francisco, the late great 500 Startups, and it was quite amazing. Yeah, I really am sorry what happened there, but they're trucking along. We were supposed to have 300 people in the room. 900 signed up, and some extraordinary number showed up. People from LA, and it was like a massive humanity seething in the audience, and everybody was so pumped and so excited. And we had in the group a couple really interesting Bitcoin token plays. One of them, Neo, is I think number 5 on the list of the top valued coins. Another one, Stellar, is a spin out in effect of Ripple, which has been a persistent coin. So it was quite a good panel, and I was honored to be on it, actually. But an amazing audience. But the point of it is this. The last time it felt like that, 1994, 1995. You go to an internet conference and just people busting out of the windows. It was amazing.
What year did Netscape IPO? Was it 94?
I think it might have been 95.
95?
So far.
Yeah. So right in there.
I had real hair then, not this gray stuff. So it was fun.
You look great with gray hair, though. You look very, as they say, suave and debonair.
Exactly. Anyway.
So, but it feels that frothy.
It is that frothy. Now, I give this little thing about bubbles all the time, which is all great network technologies come in a bubble. So, South Sea bubble. I get tulip bulbs don't count. South Sea bubble. We started doing the age of discovery and really expanding the colonies. Railroad bubbles, a couple of them. Car bubble. There was a bubble from 1915 to 1919 in the U.S., Henry Ford bubble. And, of course, the dot-com bubble, the internet. These network technologies need the boom to overcome the normal resistance and reluctance and inertia people have about something new. So you got to ask yourself, why in 98 did every company have to have a website when 2 years earlier they go, what's a website? But they had to have one. No, they didn't, but they felt they did. So it built out the web. It was an amazing... That's what a bubble does. It actually builds out the technology. And more money.
And so you think there has to be a bubble because it has to be an overwhelming thing to take hold.
Exactly. And you can call it a boom if you want to not use the bubble word because it sounds so egregiously financial. But call it a boom. All these things have to have a boom. And they have to overcome people's normal skepticism, resistance. And people have got to say, got to have a website even when they don't. Just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, that's a fascinating way to think about it. And so, where my mind goes, no surprise to you, Duncan, is, so for a category to really tip, there's got to be this boom.
Yes. Yeah. And in fact, I think in the theory, there's a theory of introduction of innovation, a theory of the curve of innovation, which looks like a big S curve. If you don't get over about 10% of adoption quickly enough, you never get there. So things will get sort of trucking along and then they fade. But if they get over the 10% mark of whatever the ultimate adoption is, they take off like crazy. And even the really reluctant late adopters then join in at the end.
Yeah, because, well, we've talked about this before. Human beings are pack animals, right? And so every iPhone user makes somebody who's not an iPhone user feel comfortable about being an iPhone user, and over time they begin to feel bad they're not, right? They got to catch up to the tribe. Exactly right. Man is a herd animal, despite what people think. And so, look, the interesting part of that is in investing, there's a 2x2 matrix for investing. And one axis is, are you right or are you wrong? Obviously, if you're wrong, forget it. You lose money. So you got to be right. The other axis is, are you with the herd or against the herd? And almost all the great wins are made, you're right and you're contrarian, against the herd. The Big Short was all about this huge bet against the herd. The herd is all stampeding, housing. And so I love that. So at Bullpen, that's what we try to do. We try to be right and contrarian. We've developed a lot of methodologies for being right, which are very metrics driven, but we have to also be contrarian. Well, and you tell me if this is unfair. I know Martino, of course, better than I know you, but you guys have a bit of a cantankerous way of being contrarian at some level, right? You sort of like being the ghost in the machine.
Yes, cantankerous is probably an old guy word that you and I would share, I guess. Paul would probably not want to be called cantankerous.
But he's kind of cantankerous, like in the most charming way, right? You guys like to be slightly disturbing. Let me say it that way. Like you guys talk in ways that make people go, "What the fuck did he just say?" You like to be that guy, those guys.
Well, Paul has figured out a very good articulation of cantankerousness in Bullpen. It took me a while to get that phrase out. His articulation is, we like to do deals that are one off the trend. So one off might mean out of favor category, or it might mean out of favor city, or it might mean out of favor founder. It's not the same thing as saying a goofball founder or a new founder, but it's somebody that may be slightly out of favor with the herd mentality. So you're one off the herd. Good example that he loves is we went into an e-commerce deal called Grove. And at the time, e-commerce was a dead category. Nobody got more than 1 or 1.5 times revenues. Amazon's going to rule the universe. Nobody's going to do e-commerce. Right after we did it, Dollar Shave Club gets bought for a huge amount. Jet.com gets bought. All of a sudden, hey, e-commerce is really hot. We just found it funny because our methodology said whether it's in favor, out of favor category, this particular company was crushing it. And their numbers would soon overwhelm the skepticism of the herd. And then the herd actually joined us now, which is even funnier. So you get a double benefit from that. Doesn't always happen like that, but when it happens, Paul smiles.
Yeah, because as we talked about in Play Bigger, you end up pulling off a giant Frodo, right? The whole thing's going this way, it's going this way, whoop, now it's going this way. It went from how it was to exactly how you wanted it to be.
Yeah, I think
it's kind of a superpower when you do that, right? You sort of feel like there's this moment where it's like surfing. You have these surf sessions where you think, wow, I'm fucking Kelly Slater, man. I got this thing down. And then, of course, what happens the next time you paddle out. But there are these moments where you feel like you're the shit, right? It's like that.
It's like that. And then you just catch the groove and everything just flies for a while. And then somebody screws up. But it's a wonderful, wonderful feeling when you're right and contrarian. When you're right and with the herd, you're just like everybody else. There's no victory there. So the victory comes when you go, aha, see? So yeah, we love that. We revel in that. That's our thing.
I love it. It's there's something very the old punk rocker in me likes the way you guys process this whole thing.
Okay, what we learned from you, by the way, is part of our criteria is, can this particular contrarian bet be a category king? Using your phrase. Yes, sir. We love that thinking because we've seen you apply it with enormous success. with companies that can understand the concept. So we love having companies and CEOs who also have this nature where they really want to be that. They want to be the big king and not just a nice deal. And if they don't have that sort of extra grit and chip on their shoulder, they're very unlikely to make it to the end.
I got to this point. I got to this point, Duncan, I don't know, 5 years or so ago, maybe even a little longer than that, where I thought if I hear one more person say, hey, man, this is going to be a giant space, there's going to be room for everybody, and we want our fair share, maybe a little more, but like, and there was all this happy fucking West Coast bullshit. This is not how this works, man. One company takes all the economics, or at least 2/3 of the economics, and then you're one of 10 companies, however many companies fighting for a quarter of the economics. That's what happens. And in some cases, as we well know, it's even much more dramatic than that. And that's what happens. We
say to those people, meh, join the herd. Look, the funny thing about your articulation, there was a guy years ago, Yagdis Sheth, Emory University, and he came up with the rule of three in a mature industry. And basically, three companies end up dominating the industry. One gets 60% share, one gets 30, and somebody stuck around 10. So in the US, it was GM, Ford, Chrysler before I think globalized. You see it over and over and over, and you don't want to be that 10%. You'd rather be a niche player. The 10% makes no money. So yes, you want to be GM or maybe Ford, where you're so strong, you make all the profit. But people don't understand that. In technology, you often have a rule of one, where a Microsoft and Intel can dominate a whole architecture. And that's where you want to be. You want what I guess Peter Thiel says, the monopolies.
Well, I'm just looking it up. There's a new car company. Is it Karma?
Karma, sure.
Is that the company? The region of Fisker, right? That's what Fisker is? Or Fisker?
I don't know what he called his new company. It may still be called Fisker. But Karma was his original car, and now he's got a new car.
Yeah, so there's a Karma Automotive. And I've been seeing their ads on TV for their new car. Have you seen these ads?
If it's the same one, I'm not sure. If it's a Fisker new car, I'm familiar with it. If it's not, I have no idea.
They roll it out the back of a delivery truck, sort of overlooking LA, shot in this very cool. It's very fucking. I mean, it's as sexy as a car ad can be. But I look at this and I just go, wow, these guys are going to go fucking bankrupt because there's no category design. The whole ad is, hey, this is a really sexy, fucking awesome, modern new car that you really want. End of ad. And I look at it and go, yeah, that's great. But like, in what category? There's no category design at all, right? And so it's just like, how can this mistake happen and just keep happening and keep happening?
It's interesting you say that. The car industry, after the Henry Ford bubble, then evolved to the GM strategy of selling the sizzle in the cars. Right? And they had different categories, Buicks. They all had a different sort of segment of the market. It worked for really well for a long time. We sort of lost all that thinking.
Yeah.
It's like nobody thinks that way. But I have a question for you, though. What do you think of Elon Musk? Does he...
I think he's fucking awesome. I think, how could he not be your hero? I mean, when I was a little boy, and I could imagine wanting to be Batman or Elon, because it's kind of the
exactly.
Shit. Right? He blows my mind. I mean, he makes me feel completely inadequate and lazy and mentally incapable and really lazy. And no, he's incredible. And he's a natural, intuitive category designer. And that's the part I hope the world understands, which is he's as legendary a category designer as he is a product and technology visionary and designer. And the fact that he's both in a Jobs-like way, in a Henry Ford-like way, what it means is the legendary innovations live and become giant multi-billion-dollar categories and industries, right? Because if you take the skill away, the skill called, let me explain to the world why this matters in the context of a really big problem and therefore a solution in a way that they can truly relate to it in a different and distinct way, the exact way I relate to it. And if the world relates to problem and solution in the same way the entrepreneur innovator does, then something legendary happens. But if they don't have that skill, it maybe doesn't go, or it turns into a micro niche. And so the thing about Elon that I love is because he's both these asinine, crazy, so far outreaching technology innovations have a chance to live in the world because he's got the ability to convince the world.
Yeah, I think that's so well put. Look at the Hyperloop. He just sort of launches a paper. But the thing that I found genius about him, you look at the original paper, his Hyperloop tube was about 1/4 the area, 1/2 the radius as the ones people are building out there. Why is that fundamental? It's 1/4 the area means it goes faster with less energy, it's lighter. It's a much better design than the big fat ones people are building. He has this ability not just to create a category and get people all excited about it. He also thought through from fundamentals what the product should really be. A lot of people don't do that. So I give him like double credit for that. Category creation, but also getting the product built on the fundamental physics, not just on some bullshit.
Yeah, no, this is not fucking Theranos that's happening here.
Exactly.
Right? This is some very, very real shit going down. That is really we haven't seen. And then if you think about some of the innovative things he's done, like so when he fucking gives away the patents at Tesla, because he's smart enough to understand as the guy that's creating the category that he can't do it alone. Doesn't matter how well he's finding. He needs competition, right? And so he gives that shit away, right? And how amazing that is. And then you think about ultimately how he connects the dots between panels and storage, and so therefore he brings the solar was it Solar City, Solar City, and Tesla together as one company because he realizes he needs scale at this battery storage problem or it's never going to go, right? And like shit like that is, I don't know, what do you call that stuff?
Well, genius. But look, I think I understand a little how his mind works. My prior venture fund invested in Tesla early. I never got the good fortune to meet Elon, but I heard a lot of Elon stories. Let me give you an example. I think the way his mind works is, I'm going to go to Mars. When I'm on Mars, we have to live underground. We can't live on the surface. I need a boring system to bore tunnels underground. The boring company. So his mind says, I got to invent a better boring system. And then he realizes the use case, instead of trying to build hyperloops or runways or whatever, roadways in a complicated city like LA, where it's too expensive, too political, drill underground. Do you see his mind going from a fundamental goal backwards to, we're going to build these little tunnels underground and get transport going so much faster than having to deal with the political morass on the surface. That is a rare type of genius going from fundamental thinking that I just adore. So I love the guy.
Well, yeah, as do I. And Duncan, we were fortunate enough to have Nancy Fund on Legends and Losers.
Yeah, she's great. DBL. She's
great. And
she's also, by the way, an example of nominative determinism. Your name determines your career. Your dentist is either Dr. Payne or Dr. Joy.
Nancy
Fund.
Right?
There you go.
It was preordained.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So like maybe if you have a child and you're really into baseball, you can name the child baseball player Lochhead.
Yeah, there you go. See if that works.
See if that.
Well, you got Tiger Woods as a golfer. Jeremy Irons, the actor, should have been a golfer, but that's enough of that silliness.
Maybe I don't know if that's a stage name or not, but yeah. Anyway, I mean, Nancy shared some really cool things about because she's been early with him on I think virtually all of his companies, or certainly some meaningful number, including Tesla and Solar City.
Yeah, she's really interesting. And Cynthia Ringo was over at Vantage Point with me, and she also is a partner at Nancy's fund. And they love the fact that they put a lot of money into the down round that Tesla had around 2008, and that was the killer round for the venture people. So I love their courage to go in at the down round side. Everybody was losing hope in Elon. And I'm so glad it paid off for them.
And isn't it interesting? So many of the legendary companies have meaningful near-death experiences at various points along the way.
Oh, they do. Like Apple. I mean, everybody knows about Apple and when Jobs took over. They don't know is, I first came to Silicon Valley to do a consulting project for Apple. They were having a real hard time because gross margins went from 50% to 20%, and their selling cost was 35%. And so at 35%, you either make 15% or you lose 15%. So they had to get their selling costs down. I was part of a big team trying to figure out how to do that. And we actually got, in two of their major divisions, in education and K-12, we got their selling costs below 10%. So we kept them going. And people don't know that if they hadn't solved that, they would have run into a real wall way before they brought Steve back to save the place.
Yeah, and the thing about history, or even sometimes as it's happening, it gets glamorized very quickly, and it's sort of like Moby Dick is a fishtail, right? It's like it's just sort of like, oh yeah, like we hit a speed bump, we just it in hindsight it sounds so up and to the right and so preordained.
Yeah, you sanitize history. I was in this company. In fact, I met Paul. He worked in my group at Intertrust. And Intertrust is a company I pitched at the IPO in the height of the bubble in '99. So it's a glorious experience. But Intertrust, a great project, was down to vapor and had to raise a $20 million round. And almost by the skin of the teeth got there. And it went on to raise $250 million in an IPO. And it's still an ongoing entity, now part of Sony Philips. But you're right, that company has a history where it was right at the very edge before they got the money in and kept going.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, I think there's a couple of those with Oracle. There's a couple of those with Adobe. I mean,
Oracle's funny. Oracle didn't really get a database to work without being bad and buggy till about Oracle 6. So the first 8 or 10 years, it was touch and go. But look what happened to them now. It is an amazing thing. You don't see that because people rewrite history.
Well, and people forget too. In the beginning, I mean, Salesforce almost died.
Yeah,
it was in deep, deep trouble. It couldn't get financing. It was in a lot of trouble.
And even Facebook had a big down round in '08. Now, big from 10, 12 billion value to 2 or 3. But for it was a serious down round, and yet it kept going.
Yeah.
So again, history sounds like it's always up and to the right, and nothing ever happened, and it's not like that. When you're inside of these things, it's chaos and it's the edge of disaster.
Right.
That's what makes them fun.
So you still love it, right? I mean, you're fired up about this Bitcoin shit.
Yeah, look, I have to give a presentation to my limited partners in a couple of days, and I'm going to talk about it. And my opening slide is a picture of the Death Star from the Revenge of the Jedi, so the one that's half formed, with a big Bitcoin B where the laser beam would be. And it's meant to say this is still a partially formed phenomenon, but it may be a giant threat to venture capital and other industries. I'm going to go through all that in the presentation. It's an exciting time. I mean, obviously right now the SEC is going to be fairly relentless to squelch a lot of the scams and charlatans in the business. But I think this is the bubble that builds out the blockchain as something fabulous. So my quick take on it is that HTML was the rails on which we built the Internet for people, the World Wide Web. Blockchain will be the rails on which we build this Internet for machines. It's going to be much more than just money. It's more like this. I'll give you a story. One of our companies, Spot Hero, is a parking company. You want to get a parking spot, you go on the app, you sign up for it, you get it. And it's basically selling the marginal parking spot in a downtown garage, like the marginal hotel room or the marginal airplane seat. I love it. I got a downtown.
That's a radical idea.
I got a $12 parking spot in the middle of downtown San Francisco today, and you only be $35. So I love the app. But let's say you go fast forward 5 years in the future. Self-driving cars. They eventually have to park. Now, you don't want to drive them out of the city and back in. That's stupid. So you want to park them downtown. How does a self-driving car get a parking spot? You go up to a downtown garage. There's always a big burly dude there. Get your ticket. So the machine inside of the car has to bid on parking spots, find the most convenient, execute a transaction, drive there and park. And the minute their contract runs out, leave. So the blockchain is a brilliant mechanism to have a parking economy like that. So I sort of envision in 5 or 8 years, you're going to have all these machines in the background bubbling along, doing transactions like that, no humans involved. And this whole thing hums, and we have no idea why it's working, but it's working seamlessly and perfectly without any type of human intervention. So I think that's what we're building right now.
So is that how we get to this thing that we've heard for a long time, the quote-unquote smart city? Is that what you're describing?
In part. Now, smart's a funny word, but smart really means, most smart contracts or smart cities are pretty dumb. But smart means it's automated. So smart doesn't mean it's going to be an Einstein and figure out what the dark matter of the universe is. What it means is a car can negotiate with a garage, cut a deal, and park, and no human involved. So smart means automated. Yes, I think smart city will not work without something like the blockchain underneath it, where it allows untrusted elements to come together and do transactions seamlessly, simply, easily, quickly, automatically, whatever adjective I can throw in. Or is that
yeah? So the big question I've been dying to ask you is, I think all this stuff is fascinating, and I think we've come to a place where it seems, I don't know, you tell me, it seems inevitable that where we are with the internet today mandates a new paradigm. That's what it has begun to feel like to me. Now, that said, here's the big question. The financial system as we understand it today has guide rails and backstops and shit in place. And, supposedly, of course, one day it's tied to gold, today it's not. But there's a lot of infrastructure in our world, the treasury, insurance rates, the whole thing, that is designed to keep the system from fucking collapsing. And if shit gets weird, we can't have runs on the banks, and the stock market will stop trading for everybody to chill their nuts out. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in place to make sure Humpty Dumpty doesn't get fucked up here, right? And so my question is that happening in this world? And then if it is or it isn't, then I have questions about that. But tell me about how I should think about those things in this world.
Well, first of all, I'm a believer that markets should be fair and honest. And that usually means they need to be regulated. Because, for example, you want to make sure the restaurant doesn't have poisonous or cockroachy food. So you have to have some level of regulation to make sure markets work honestly.
That is to say, I hate to interrupt you, but that is to say, we don't want the pure, I don't know, maybe libertarian point of view that says, leave them alone. They don't have to do anything. If the food's good, the market will tell us. And if people get sick and don't eat there again, then they'll go out of business. And we don't need any government in there.
Yeah, I think that point of view is naive. If you go back to the origins of a lot of libertarian thinking, like the Enlightenment, and you read Adam Smith, everybody loves him. He's the Bible. He wrote two major books. One of the books was about morality, and the other book was about Wealth of Nations. In the Wealth of Nations, he said, the market is not designed to trust people. We know the merchant will tip the scale. We know that people will cheat. So he believed there's a layer of regulation you needed to make sure markets are honest and trustworthy. Beyond that, you can leave it alone. And I believe that ever since. So in the stock market, you want the exchange, the public exchange, to be honest. If you get down to the pink sheets or off over-the-counter in trading, you can get cheated with spreads are too big and all that. So I believe in that. On the other hand, well, let me just finish.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's very clear that a market can be regulated to be honest, but also can be over-regulated to die by its own weight. I think Dodd-Frank is so weighty and ponderous. I can tell you Sarbanes-Oxley did not help the IPO business. A bunch of regulations like decimalization killed off the small investment banks. So over-regulating or improperly regulating this crushed the old IPO business. So regulation.
And the thing, on SOX, I don't think we needed SOX. I was an officer and director of public companies at that time. And if you were fucking confused when you signed off on the financials, that you were signing off on the financials as an officer, as a audit committee member, you're fucking insane. It just was so overreaching. Those
Yes.
things. The problem. It was classic. The problem wasn't the laws. The problem was the laws in place were not being enforced. Right.
Exactly right.
Fucking
And that gets back to herd animal. You ask yourself.
Just got me fired up.
No, but in a mania, in a bubble, the SEC will back off enforcing. They'll get caught up in it. So you saw all these examples were legally wrong and not enforced. So passing SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley, didn't help. It just layered a whole level
full-time employment act for a shit ton of lawyers and accountants.
Exactly right. I know
And
the
the
math.
reality is, if you wanted to lie, then you could, and if you want to lie now, you can.
Yes. No, I agree with you. And so the regulators.
Here's the thing. Sorry, maybe let me get this out. Here, the thing in my head goes like this: the reward for playing nice, for being ethical, for being a good person, for having commonly accepted values, the reward for that is greater in the long term than the potential reward in the short term for breaking the rules, being an asshole or a criminal. That if there's a common belief in the world that that's true, then we're attracting people. That is to say, we're, as a society, having the incentives in place to be good and play the game as we believe it should be played in general, as opposed to doing the bad or wrong thing in the short term. And doesn't that always have to be the, if you will, the societal math for this to work?
If you go back to the foundations of Adam Smith, he assumed people would cheat, but he assumed the overall market would be morally just. And that if you didn't have a layer of morality among most participants, the system would break down because you can't regulate if everybody's corrupt. Let me put it differently. We've had over 100 years of the progressive era and the regulatory administrative state. And what we've learned, the most obvious thing we've learned is the regulators get captured by the regulated. So instead of the regulators helping people, they get caught and they protect the incumbents. So the FCC will protect big media, right? They'll protect, you get my idea. The ICC was supposed to stop railroad cheating. They protected the big railroad companies. And so they they preserve incumbency and they prevent startups. So the venture industry should in general be very opposed to the regulatory state because of regulatory capture. Unfortunately, people have gotten politically so pumped up, they love regulators. But the problem with regulators is who regulates regulators. Once they get captured, it's like concrete. It's hard to get rid of. So you go back to Wall Street, we all know that Wall Street people get away with all kinds of scams and flim-flams. So we want them to be regulated. But their people, Goldman Sachs ends up running the Treasury, SEC, it's a rotating.
Right. You're like, what the fuck's going on?
Exactly.
We understand here what happened, right?
Yeah.
The fox is literally managing the fucking hen house.
Exactly right.
Like on what planet does that happen? It's
Planet DC. That's a planet.
Great.
Planet Washington.
Wow.
All right. So let's say you end up having a blockchain system. Now, it doesn't get rid of regulation, and it itself has to be somewhat regulated. But part of the belief here is you can have technology regulation. Now, we haven't proven this, but there's an undercurrent in technology sectors. Maybe technology can create self-regulating systems. So we try to have things where you get rated and there's trust and all that. It doesn't quite work great, but it may work better than regulators. I think most people would prefer to be in an Uber than a taxi cab. The cabs had a regulated cab commissions, and they got captured, obviously. They served the interests of the cab companies, not the passengers. And so people tend to think that Uber is a better experience, even though it's got some problems in it, because the ratings and then you just sort of trust it more, right? That's an example.
It's so interesting you bring that up, Duncan, because the first company that I can remember, you tell me how you remember it, that figured that out and then it worked at scale. It was a big part of why it worked, of course, was eBay.
Yeah.
Because
eBay.
best I can remember, if you take that sort of that trust, that crowd rating out of it, eBay's got a lot more risk. And so that de-risks the transaction, right?
It did. And also people found that if you went through the eBay system and didn't get end-runded by some scam, you'd be able to you'd sell your product and get the money. And so it worked as a trusted system, even though you didn't know anybody. And so I agree with you. And the ratings help a lot. You want that 5-star up there. And the same thing on Amazon. They have ratings that make you have like 8 choices to pick. You go to the one that's highest rated, even if you have to pay a little more. That's how the system should work.
Yeah.
So you move forward to the blockchain. You can imagine the blockchain in Wall Street. Wall Street's too complicated. There's a lot of interactions that you can get rid of layers of people to watch layers of people. So the blockchain can really help to cut the cost of Wall Street. R3 is a consortium that the banks are working on to try to do this. So at some point that'll happen. But more generally, though, you could think of a myriad of transactions that occur, like you go to a parking garage where you don't have to trust any of the two sides. Once they go through the blockchain, you don't need to trust them. But you will know that that spot is available and that car can park there and nobody's going to kick it out. So you don't have to know who owns the parking garage. You don't have to know who the big burly guy is. You don't have to know any of that stuff. That is a really good world for most of us because the blockchain systems are meant to enforce trust when there is no trust. And they should lower transaction costs and lower risk without having a bunch of regulators overseeing the parking garages.
And what about the anonymity part? I mean, what you just described, if I understood it, or if I didn't quote Archie Bunker, misconstrue it, is that let's say I'm the person paying for the parking. I don't necessarily know who the other parties are involved, who owns the spot, or who's guaranteeing that it's available at that time, or I don't need to know anybody else in the quote unquote chain. All I know is I have a confirmation that for N dollars, I'm going to have this spot for X amount of time.
Yes. So you don't have to know the other side. The anarchist side of the internet, I should say, would love blockchains and Bitcoins to be completely anonymous. I don't think that's how the world's going to end up. For one thing, governments don't like that. And even today, if you're going to do transactions in and out of fiat currencies, you got to worry about anti-money laundering laws and things like that. There's rules you have to follow to in and out of the real world. So I don't think we're going to end up with this extreme libertarian view of everybody being anonymous in transaction. But having said that, you don't have to know the other side of the party. Somebody may be able to identify who the two parties are, but you don't have to know the other side. They can be an untrusted anonymous party to you, and it would still work.
Right, as long as they're you tell me, an accredited provider, participant in the network, whatever, rated by the crowd. How should we think about it?
You can think about it that way. Let me give you an analogy. IBM's working on a food chain blockchain. So literally, you take a pig farm in China and you then move it from there to where it gets, skinned and cooked or whatever, and then the bacon moves to a distribution point, eventually ends up in somebody's hamburger. They're trying to track every single step of the way. Now, theoretically, they can blockchain every event. This pig farm and this pig by this farmer was then sent to this slaughterhouse, was then sent to this curing area, whatever it is. You could imagine along the way that human beings can find a way to kind of cheat the system and fake some of the step-by-step. But what they're thinking is the whole chain of custody could then be looked at by machine learning. And you can look for anomalies, like a delay that shouldn't have happened or some kind of thing looks weird, and then you can flag it. So that system should be much, much more trustworthy than it is today. You don't need inspectors to go to the pig farm. You see what I'm getting at? You can get rid of a lot of regulators trying to do the same thing. And yet there will be things that will sneak through that might be anomalous. And so the machine learning might flag a bad thing, and then you check out only the anomalies. That system is much lower transaction costs, much more trusted, even if it's not 99.9% pure. You follow me? It'd still be better than the day where you can bribe the inspector and have a bad pig go through the slaughterhouse, right? That's old-fashioned way of cheating.
To quote the Big Lebowski, there's a lot of strands in the old duder's head about this, but the first one, Duncan, is
I'll call you the dudeacre then if you want.
The first strand in the old duder's head on this one is I'm thinking back to the supply chain automation days, with Bond and those sorts of applications, and ultimately SAP and all that shit, right? And I think about all the supply chain integration and EDI. I remember all that shit. And so I'm just, as you're talking, I'm sort of having this time warp in my head where I'm sort of back in the late '80s, early '90s with all that shit, and then I'm hearing this going, holy fucking fuck, that shit sounds really old, and it was revolutionary then. What you just said was some Star Wars shit. Because, and this is what I want to get to. So this is where we have the integration of IoT to blockchain, right? Because I assume you're using some kind of IoT.
You got a thing or a camera thing or something.
There's something tracking, in this case, the pig, right?
Yeah.
So there's probably more than one IoT thing. There's probably cameras and a tag and a sensor and a fucking who knows, I don't know what.
Exactly right. Yes.
So that's IoT and blockchain meeting, and then do you consider machine learning and AI the same thing or two different things?
AI is a broader category. Machine learning is a subset, and it's a very good subset. It's becoming a commodity, which is kind of cool, very rapidly.
Which is
I think of machine learning as, I think a lot of AI right now is a big database structure, which is different than SQL or other databases. Machine learning extracts, information out of a big mass of data in a clever way. So think of it as a giant database. Everybody thinks of AI as scary. It's going to be a robot, like Terminator. No, it's just a big database with much more clever ability to extract information and do something. That's machine learning. Keep going.
And then, I'm drawing this diagram. Right now it's a triangle, you tell me. So that's the intersection of machine learning, IoT, and blockchain.
And let me add something on top. Call the next layer a digital marketplace. So Slack for everybody.
Yeah, okay.
The digital marketplace is the old.
Right. That's where the parking comes in.
Yeah, but the digital marketplace is a different animal. It's like you have every single participant in the supply chain sign in once, like a huge Slack thing, and they sign in and they transact through the digital marketplace. You don't need to have SAP over here and Ariba over there and all these little chunky pieces. It's one consistent digital marketplace. In a way, we reintegrate or mediate. Everybody wanted to get rid of the middleman. We create a new middleman with digital marketplace. The blockchain could be below that, and the blockchain makes all these people trusted. So if you are a factory for shoes in Dongguan, China, you can get a blockchain ID. And then anytime any shoe comes off your line in Dongguan, it is compared to the fact it's the right ID. And it's very easy to do that, but it's now trusted because the blockchain is certified you are that factory. Somebody can't spoof it now. And all the way through the whole supply chain, every participant can be first introduced as trusted, and then you can keep the spoofers out. And so the digital marketplace is a fantastic thing. Now, if I can layer one more thing on top, the blockchain enables you to create what's called a token. Some people call it a coin, but I'll call it a token. It's a ticket. Like in my parking case, it's a parking ticket for the car to go buy a parking spot. In this case, it might be a shoe ticket where the shoe flows all the way through the supply chain, and every transaction step of the way, you exchange this little shoe token step by step by step by step. And the shoe token is how you do a transaction in that blockchain. Different blockchain might have different tokens. That's what the world of the future is going to look like. And that token can be eventually transferred into real money. And maybe if you're in the shoe business, you don't really care. You might have a whole stock of shoe tokens. Nike may have billions of them. They buy shoes, they sell shoes, and the shoe token keeps the system running. That's sort of what the vision is people have. And if you get that around your head, you realize every single major supply chain in the world, food, shoes, whatever you want to think of, cars, parking, can become a digital marketplace with a blockchain underneath. And the whole thing just hums in the background with a higher level of trust. And when you get there, you need some level of regulation of the blockchain system itself. But otherwise, this is largely self-regulating. Trusted Dongguan factory, trusted shoe comes off the line, trusted distributor. The electronics give you a higher level of trust and have an inspector, which you might have to bribe. One more story. I saw when that big oil well burned up in the Gulf. One of the things that struck me as really bad is that the inspector of oil wells for whatever the Federal Energy Commission is, was so stretched, it might take him like 10 years to visit every oil platform in his purview. And so therefore, the inspection was kind of a joke. It wasn't actually reality. So you could layer a lot of inspectors on and people to go do the inspection, or we could start building these systems in an automated way with cameras and all that. So you can watch the oil rig and make sure it's operating in a proper way instead of a bad way. 15 years out, I think that's going to be commonplace. Today, it sounds like science fiction.
Well, and I think maybe there's lots of it that's science fiction-y, but I would start with just this whole idea that the supply chain and the, if you will, the money chain or the financial chain are the same thing, right? That it used to be you thought about a supply chain and logistics and, as a thing that a company does if they'd have to do that. And that was this thing over here. And then there were financial transactions. And what you're saying is there's an actual integration now at every step of the way.
Yes, there could be. There was, if you go back to the history of capitalism, this is something I love and it's sort of obscure, but going back to the marketplaces that evolved after the Black Death in Northern Europe, you'd go to the little marketplace to sell your wool or something, and you'd have to check in your sword and your arrows, or whatever, your knives. You couldn't go in armed into the marketplace. And you deposit your gold into a vault. And then you go inside a piece of paper, buy, sell, like trading places. And at the end, you'd line up at the clearinghouse, and you'd give them all the chits, and they would then give you back a little more gold, a little less gold, and then off you go with your sword. That evolved into the modern system of the gold economy until we killed it off after World War I. And in that system, there was something called the real bill, which just meant a 90-day note drawn on the gold in the Bank of England. Now that thing let people go to China, buy silk, get it made into some kind of weaving, buy insurance, put on a boat, get it to Harrods in London. That system was just based on these real bills, and they traded all the time like little chits, just like in the marketplace. All right, fast forward to digital gold. Forget the gold standard. These tokens behave like that. They can become little chits all the way through the whole supply chain, from when you first start to when you finally sell it to a consumer and it turns into real money. And you can create these whole utilities, digital utilities, where money doesn't change hands until the very end, when the clearinghouse divides up the spoils to everybody. In that sense, yes, you've integrated the finance with the utility, at least from the beginning to end of the digital marketplace. Now, it's actually funny to me because it's almost a reversion back to what we used to have before we killed off the real bill in World War I. And it's a much sounder economic system than what we have today if we can ever get this thing built.
This may be a weird way to think about it, but it's what's in my head. Is it sounder because there's more transparency at every stage?
Yes, it's lower transaction costs, which is fundamental to economic growth. It is
because we've accepted one language, essentially. We have one.
Yes.
We have one supply chain IoT / payment system. Is that?
Yes, and the transaction costs.
And so because we've all standardized on this one thing, it's just like, Betamax, right? You got to fucking go. Sorry. Right. Yeah. And so when everybody agrees that this is the standard for supply chain management and financial management, and we all just plug the fuck in. Yeah. We have massive economies of scale.
Yes. It's cheaper.
And if I'm SAP, I'm shitting bricks.
You might be, or you have to build one. But it's cheaper, and it's more trusted, and it's much more quick in the process. Because all these little things like lawyers and letters of credit and having to fly over to Hong Kong to get in the way go away. And so yes, I'm hoping this thing happens because it'll accelerate the global economy as opposed to slow it down with trade wars and crap.
Well, and then just if we could get back to my question for a sec. So are there natural fail-safes in, or how does that part work? So if there was some kind of a run on Bitcoin, just like you'd have a bank run, that the thing couldn't just evaporate quickly?
Well, these tokens may not necessarily be based on Bitcoin, and their utility in the marketplace is where the value comes from. It doesn't come from some fluffy bubble out in the outside world. What we're seeing now with Bitcoin, Bitcoin, the bubble of Bitcoin in the last 3 months is astounding. I have a chart which compares it to the dot-com bubble and the gold bubble in 1980 and the housing bubble, and I didn't do tulip bulbs, but it's basically the most stunning bubble, at least since tulip bulbs. So, but that isn't what we're basing this on. The utility itself of the token flowing through the system and the value it creates is where the value comes from. Bitcoin can run up or down, whatever it wants. So it's not based on the Bitcoin exploding. I wouldn't worry about that. I think that's thinking too much in monetary terms. Think of this more as a digital marketplace with utility in it.
Yeah.
So let me try one more thing on you. This is something I've been thinking about. Let me give you an analogy. I think that the next 15 years, we are going to feel like between now and 2032 that we fast forward into the future. This sounds like science fiction, but by 2032, it'll be, how could we ever do it any other way? Let me give you an analogy. 1895, you're an American, and you're on a farm mostly, and your life is to take your stuff to the little town 5 miles away, get your thing from the Wells Fargo wagon, and go back to the farm. No electricity, right? No telephone, not really any cars, just horses everywhere. Manure is a big business.
Not much to do. A lot of work to be done.
Yeah, no, and think about it. No washing machine, no appliances. 1910, you're now in a city. There's cars, not manure. There are telephones. There's electric lights. Best of all, there's a washing machine and there's utilities. You feel like airplanes flying overhead. If you went from 1895 to 1910, 15 years, you felt like you fell into a Jules Verne novel. The future came so fast, and it was stunning.
In 15 years.
15 years.
That's what happened in that exact span of time.
Exactly right. And that happens, when it happens really fast. So 2032, you're in a self-driving car. You can't imagine the pain of driving. You sit back and you might be, doing work or watching a movie or talking to people.
Don't I still get to drive my Shelby Cobra Mustang?
Only on the racetrack. But I'm telling you, you would.
Oh, fuck. Really? They're not going to let me drive it on the road, Duncan?
Well, you can go up to the mountains and drive around curves if you want. But fundamentally, your day-to-day person won't imagine how much more of a paradise it feels. All this stuff you're buying gets printed by 3D printers down. You don't have to worry about them being shipped from China. All these things you used to worry about just go away. Other worries, right? People always worry. But your life is this humming little machine of all these machines around you doing stuff like parking their cars. You don't have to worry about it anymore. And you'll think it's paradise.
So are we in the Stone Age? Is that what you're telling me? We're 15 years from now?
We're 1895.
We're 1895.
We're on the farm. And in the future, we'll be in the big city, even though it's a city. I mean, you just feel like it's a whole different, wonderful, marvelous future.
Now, I think it sounds it sounds great and a little spooky, but if you say, hey, today's solutions are tomorrow's problems. So, what's the downside of this in 15 years, Duncan, or is it all hunky-dory?
Well, whenever change happens this fast, there's a segment of people that panic and get upset and have a hard time dealing with it. And I don't think in 1895 and 1910 we worried much over that. I think this time around we should worry a lot about that. Everybody tries to describe it as the truck drivers will have to find a job and they're in their 50s and they're unemployable. Well, I don't think that's quite fair for them because, for example, go back to machine learning. People are building these customer support systems where you are a human being and some angry customer is yelling at you because something broke. You say, please, let me help you. In front of you is a screen which tells you what the solutions could be. And the screen is now AI. It's not that the AI bot talks directly to the person because that'll make an angry person twice as angry. It's that the truck drivers usually have good empathy because they've had to load and unload and deal with people. They could be on the phone call and the machine is able to make them very smart about something very quickly. It's not quite like plugging into the matrix and flying a helicopter, but it's an equivalent empowering thing where these people don't have to go back to community college and learn how to computer program to get a real job. No, the future world will enable people to be pushed up to a higher level of support and activity because all this AI will do all the drudgery stuff they don't have to learn at school. I think it'll actually be a way to employ people, but we can't just let it sit there. We're going to have to work in parallel with this 15-year future to make sure we take care of the whole population.
Yeah, interestingly, one of the things Nancy said was they being her firm, look to invest in companies that also create meaningful jobs. They said one of the things she loved about Tesla was the auto industry in the Bay Area was essentially dying, right? And Tesla, in a very real way, saved it. And so whenever this AI discussion and self-driving cars and all this shit goes off, to your point, that's where everybody goes, oh, well, there's however many million truck drivers and however many this and that and the other. And now what's everybody going to fucking do?
Yeah,
as opposed to talk about that there's going to be a whole new set of jobs.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, though, that central planners can never envision the future jobs. The history of central planning and try to program this is wrong. We spent a lot of money trying to create green academies for green jobs, and there's no really good green jobs out there anymore. That's not the way to do it. So the other thing that's wrong is Bill Gates, among others, say we should tax robots. Well, are you kidding me? You're going to make robots more expensive and less likely to be put in place. Whereas if they get put in place faster, you can get people out of the drudgery of an assembly line into a higher level of work.
Isn't that funny? I had no idea he said that. Isn't that interesting that he would say that?
It is. It's like a knee-jerk reaction. We should tax the robots so we can pay for people to be on welfare. And I'm thinking to myself, if you tax the robots, you make them more expensive. How stupid is that? And people don't want to be on welfare. They want a productive job. So
would he have wanted people to tax the personal computer because it was going to get rid of people in the typing pool?
I think I'll ask him that. I already get a chance to ask him.
Well, no, that's what fucking happened. There used to be a typing pool, man. There's no fucking typing pool anymore, right?
Well, here's a good story. I'll get one more story on that line.
Yeah, go.
Everybody was afraid that desktop publishing would kill typography jobs. And they did. But the number of font people is 10 times higher today than it was back in the 80s for typography. So it actually created 10 times more new jobs than it killed in the old jobs. That's how it always works. It's just, you can't envision the new jobs. The market is too complicated. The economy is too robust for central planners to plan that way. But instead, you have to create the conditions where people do fine to get employed in new jobs. So, for example, my thing there is, a lot of the problem in the U.S. is a lot of great jobs in Silicon Valley. How many are left in Detroit? And so you can't just let Detroit lie fallow where people rush here to get new jobs. We have to find some way to create a robust economy in Detroit again. And that's a hard problem to solve, but that's where I think people should be thinking along those lines and not trying to say, let's tax robots.
No, that's like saying let's tax PCs. So that doesn't make any sense. I mean, look, I might be afraid of robots too. I don't know what I think about robots, but we can't do that, right? And to your point, this is what I love about entrepreneurship, and this is what I love about Silicon Valley. Who are entrepreneurs? They are the people who are willing to go solve big problems, take big risks in making a big difference for a big reward. And are there things that society needs that government can do? Absolutely. I'm not one of these, the government can't fucking do anything, guys. No, of course not. The road's awesome, and there's a lot of shit the government does that's awesome that we all enjoy every day, so that I think that's a stupid thing to say. That said, entrepreneurs play an extraordinary role in dealing with big problems, and having an entrepreneurial incentive that is both personal reward as well as financial reward is what we need to be in place to have people go tackle these big fucking things.
No, well put. And the sad part is, even though we live in the bubble in Silicon Valley and think the world's full of entrepreneurs, it's not. And how do you teach people in Detroit to be entrepreneurs? And they may be doing Detroit type of companies as opposed to Silicon Valley type. But we've lost that. We always think the problem is people get a job. No, let's teach these people how to build a company, create jobs, but we don't spend the time doing it. I think that
it terrifies me. I mean, you probably know the data that we're at the lowest level in recorded entrepreneurship in American history.
Yes.
And that more companies die every week than are started in America.
Yeah, I also think inequality is at record levels. But can I give you a perspective on that? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
So a lot of people have argued, why is inequality so high? And it turns out in history, it was high in the 1920s too. So the 1920s were characterized by a huge bubble, real estate bubble, stock market bubble, because the Federal Reserve basically made money cheap. And just like in our recent housing bubble, everybody went crazy. So you could argue, and I would argue, that inequality is primarily due to financialization bubbles. Now, right now, we're blowing the biggest bubble in human history with low or negative interest rates and all this free, cheap money. What happens? Inequality skyrockets. The way I think about it and try to explain it to people is, in a normal economy, real businesses borrow money to build plants. And these plants and employ middle-class jobs, and they produce enough cash flow to pay off the loan and expand. That's a normal type of way to do lending. When you get into a speculative economy where it's all about the stock market and all about financialization, instead you starve middle-class jobs. You stop investing in middle-class businesses in Detroit, and you put all the money in some kind of financial flim-flam in Wall Street. As a consequence, all the money will gravitate to the financial intermediaries. The middle class is so large, it declines slowly as you starve it of plants. Wall Street's so small, it skyrockets. I will tell you, during the housing bubble, the Wall Street financial sector, which normally is about 10% of profits, that's sort of the big for being financial, it went up to an average of 33%. In the peak of the bubble, 40% of all American profits went to Wall Street. Now that's where inequality comes from. And this is a crime. Yeah, fuck. I mean, I think somebody told me there was $6 trillion of profits and $2 trillion funneled into financialization in those years, and everything blew up. Nobody goes to jail, right?
Look, and I have some friends in that world, and I know you do too, and some of them are very, very good people. And so caveat. And like lawyers, and again, I have friends that do that, caveat. They're fucking barnacle industries, right? They're not actually doing the shit. They're making money off of the people who do the shit. Is that unfair?
It's not unfair. And they provide a worthwhile service that's worth about 10% of a VIG, not 40%. So what we have to do...
Okay, I can live with that.
Yeah, we have to restructure the financial world so that we're not incenting speculation and financialization and financial bubbles. Instead, we're incenting investment in real companies and real plant, real businesses. And we've gotten way off that for about 20 years, and hence inequality is high.
My friend Tony Chan says it's the difference between value capture and value creation.
Very good way to put it.
Yeah,
but I think we have to change. We have to change. People talk about inequality. We got to tax this to give people money. That's not the problem. The problem is we've got to change the incentives so it doesn't all flow to financialization. It flows to real businesses and real companies.
So let me just make sure I follow the thread. The reason inequality skyrockets in upturns is the percentage of the economy that goes to use your term, financialization goes up. And that part of our world is skewed to a white male demographic.
Well, you could put it that way. I'd put it a little differently.
Okay, I want to know how you put it. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I want to know. I'm trying to understand what you mean.
In a normal economy, the financial sector primarily funds main street businesses, plants, houses, cars with collateral. And they expect to get repaid based on the value of the business and growing up.
At what the market at the time considers a reasonable return, but not crazy.
Well, the interest rates go up or down based upon the view of what investment horizon is. When the Federal Reserve artificially lowers interest rates, or as we used to call it, the Greenspan put, where they let Wall Street take excessive risks and then they bail them out with giving them free money. That's been going on since '87. When we do that, we create a world in which the money flows more towards speculation because there is this backstop implicit from the Federal Reserve and away from normal businesses. And it's easy to make money on financialization, much easier. So basically, the Federal Reserve has been constantly providing sort of a bubble-like economy to Wall Street. And Wall Street people act like they would normally do. The incentives say do this, they do it. We just have to change that structure. People have this naive view that when interest rates are low, people will borrow more to build businesses. That's not how it works because a bank lends against the spread. If the interest rates are low and the returns expected are low, they won't lend against the project. So actually, higher interest rates are healthier for an economy than we have right now. So if we normalize the market, give incentives to real business, teach people how to be entrepreneurs, have the financial sector have a bigger spread for normal business investment, the economy will right itself. Right now, we're keeping interest rates so low, the only place you can make money is throwing it into the stock market where it goes up on paper. That's the simplest way I can put it.
All right. So what do you think interest rates should be?
Normally in an economy, they're around 6%. And that's like a 30-year treasury is usually 6%. A 10-year treasuries might be 4.5%. Right
and that
now,
doesn't sound outrageous to me.
No, it's not.
Right? And you could actually, if it was at 6%, you could buy a long-term bond at what, 4%?
You could.
Yeah. On a long-term bond, on a 15-year bond today, what do you get?
You get nothing. If you're a European, you get negative interest rates. So, yeah.
No, but like this, nobody buys bonds. There's no such thing as a bond right now. Am I wrong?
Well, no. People tend to buy muni bonds because it's triple tax free, and
Okay.
resilient. But you're right.
But that's an artificial situation. There's no return to be made.
Not really, but people do buy treasuries at scale because it's collateral for other activities, so they need the collateral. So treasuries are still a robust market. But my point is, the banks are not
Well, there's always that, Duncan.
No, but the banks are not lending
I understand.
to business at scale. And Wall Street's not incented to do that because the spreads are too small. And this Dodd-Frank
because they can go play in this world.
Exactly. And the Dodd-Frank monstrosity, the monstrosity of Dodd-Frank sort of crushed smaller banks. Just like what happened after the dot-com bubbles, we crushed the small investment banks that tech used to thrive on. And we put it all into this big five, too big to fail things. And their incentive is not to lend to Main Street businesses. We got to change all that.
But the destruction in local banks is breathtaking.
Profound. Yeah, it's profound. The good news is if we could write the bubble economy from the Federal Reserve, Wells Fargo, people like that have a lot of branches and they start lending to real business again. You would see
the other problem with that, and I know this is going to sound corny and probably incredibly naive, but I think the further away people are from the people they're actually doing business with, the worse shit gets. So, of course, living here in California, there's a lot of benefits to living here, and we're sort of the epitome of the quote-unquote farm-to-table, food paradigm. We have 2 farmers markets that we go to every week, and we grow our own vegetables and, all this kind of stuff. But it's very it's very uncommon to see that. And so there's this, the more disconnected we are from our world, from who we're doing business with, we have chickens. Well, I used to just buy eggs and never fucking think about it. Well, now, Duncan, I realize, like, holy fuck, this girl went to work to make this fucking thing. This is a goddamn gift. Like, be careful. Don't drop this fucking thing, right? And so I guess my point is this sort of disconnection from who we're doing business with. It almost makes business like a video game or just a spreadsheet set of analysis that we're doing, as opposed to I go to the farmer's market and, like, the kids selling me the berries are like the kids who work for the mom and the dad back at the ranch, so to speak.
No, that's well put. I do think high tech requires high touch, and people often think it doesn't. And the face-to-face and seeing the farmer and talking about how they actually prepared it is an amazing experience. You get better eggs, better berries that way.
Right, so, and like, one of our favorite restaurants in Santa Cruz, we know the owner. Actually, I think, do we know him at all of them? I bet you we know him at half of them. And to the point where you walk in the restaurant, you see the owner. If he's busy with somebody else, at least he looks up and smiles. And if he's not, he comes right over. How you have a chat? How you been? Sit you down, and he says, "Oh, what are you thinking about?" Oh, then I think I have the wine for you. And all of that real experience, it connects you to who you're doing quote unquote business with in a way that when you're not in a community, the whole thing starts to fucking break down. And so I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but I think we need more real connectedness, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Well, one possible future, this whole blockchain thing I was rapping about, let's go to the truck drivers. It may not end up where the truck deliveries are totally autonomous. You may still have a human being on the truck, both unloading it, talking to the customer, dealing with issues that only a human being can handle properly. And it won't be this impersonal thing. I don't know if that's going to happen that way, but I could imagine the long-haul trucks are autonomous, but the local delivery are not. And maybe an Amazon drone drops down a package from Amazon, but that isn't your daily experience. Your daily experience, a delivery person is actually somebody you talk to and have a relationship with. I don't know if that's what's going to happen.
Well, to that point, I'm sure you heard, I blew my mind that they were piloting a new service with their, I forget what they call it, their Amazon Home system, whereby an Amazon delivery person could have the code to come into your house and drop the shit off in your house. You hear
That's
this?
A little much, isn't it?
They would have the code would only work for 5 minutes or whatever the fuck. And so Yeah, but that they could, an Amazon delivery person would actually be in your house. This is I'm not making this shit up. I think they're beta testing this.
Well, it may actually work out because think of the trust factor. If that person steals or does anything,
Well,
you know who they are. You know how to chase them down.
It's sort of the point, right? Yeah.
Regulation here. You don't need it, right? So the technology.
And of course, there's cameras in your fucking house, right?
That's right. So I think, and they'll probably have a camera so they walk through and you know what they actually do. I think there's a way for the technology regulation to be better than we have right now. And you'll trust the person, not because you trust the person, but because of this. But look, most people know their postal delivery person and they talk to them, especially at Christmas.
Absolutely.
You know, and so that becomes a relationship which allows you to have higher trust. That's why I think the real last mile may have a lot of people in it and not be totally autonomous for these reasons.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, there is a delivery experience that we have, and particularly now that we all buy so much shit on Amazon with our mail person, with our UPS person, and with our FedEx person. And maybe this is a corny thing, but as I think about it, those are generally very positive interactions. They tend to be very friendly people. They're giving you a service. You're happy to be getting whatever the shit is, even if it's partially junk mail. But there's a nice, when you actually have a person, you know, you're actually there when they show up, right? Or you're in the driveway or whatever the fuck. That's a nice interaction, like the vast majority of the time.
No, I agree. I look at Apple retail, sort of an outlier, but
unbelievable
high service.
Insanity.
Right. And so the world of the future, this 15-year vision, may be more high touch than today. And not all of Walmart where things are sort of strewn on the floor and nobody cares. Walmart itself might be very high touch and very high service to people. We don't know, but I would rather have that future and not this future of autonomous vehicles plunking packages on your head when you're in your front yard.
You know, it's funny you say that. You just triggered something in my head. I just wrote down Target versus Apple. I don't go into Target very much, but we have one in Santa Cruz. It's a small one because we're a small beach town. But and like I only ever go on like a Wednesday afternoon or whatever, you know, pick up a prescription or that sort of a thing. Anyway, you would think that if your primary competitive advantage over Amazon was you're a physical location, that you would be fucking awesome at having a physical location. But it's the opposite. There's a line. It's fucking unbelievable. And to your point, you walk into Apple, it's a fucking 3-ring circus in there, man. You'd swear they're giving out money. There's so many people in the place. And you can go into Apple and have this incredible experience.
You're right. We call up here Target. Yeah. But I think Target is the better of these highly discounted places like Walmart. And if Kmart still exists, Kmart. But having said that, they could really improve by going more in the Apple direction, and people would resonate with that. They have done a much better job of stocking and having flow. But you're right. They have problems sometimes with lines. But it's sort of endemic to a crowded store at the wrong time of the week. But nonetheless, I could imagine Target being more high touch in the future and less high tech. Or maybe both, but you sort of disguise the tech and the touch is what you remember.
Well, and that gets us back to this world you're telling me about, right?
You're going to love this.
15 years out.
I think I'm going to.
I don't know about the no driving.
You can always drive off drive down Route 1 to Big Sur if they ever open that road up. You'll be able to do that.
It's back open now, yeah. So I'll still be able to do that on the weekend or whatever if I want, or maybe on a Wednesday afternoon if I want.
I'm sure. I think autonomous driving starts off in city cores and on special lanes. So the carpool lane becomes an autonomous lane as opposed to it just intermixes with other cars. So human beings will still be there getting in accidents, having fun.
And then I had this aha via my brother-in-law, Martin, who's a very smart guy and an IT tech kind of a guy. And he said something interesting. So he has daughters who are, 12 or 13 now, my nieces. And he said that they are the last generation that are going to learn to type.
That may be true. I think the next big interface is voice. Alexa's kind of showing us that. And it may very well be we just talk instead of typing in the future.
That's his current theory. I fucking hate those things, though.
Well, look, they're getting really, really good. And the universal translator, where you can talk to somebody in Chinese and they'll translate it, I guess, accurately but funny, would be really powerful as opposed to sort of stilted.
Yeah.
That's the world of the future. And so
I don't know. I'm just freaked out by the.
Think about this. You get to go to Italy, and with your universal translator, buongiorno, you can speak to Italians in a way that they'll resonate with. It's a more wonderful world. Commerce and tourism will be easier. You can go to French, and actually get a decent experience in a restaurant without having to take French. Think of the glory of that. Yeah, exactly. You can go to New Zealand and understand what they're saying to you. So that's a Kiwi joke based upon the new commercials for Air New Zealand, which are hilariously funny.
Are they? I haven't noticed them yet.
Oh, no, the New Zealand accent is beyond the Australian. It's just an amazingly difficult accent for Americans because all the vowels are shifted. And they're making fun of it. I love it.
Yeah, I'll have to keep an ear open. I have some Kiwi friends. Yeah, they are. I don't know. They're a different group, are they not?
I lived in New Zealand for a while in Christchurch.
Did you really?
I love New Zealand. It's a beautiful country and wonderful people. But the accent is a challenge for Americans.
You've lived so many interesting lives, Duncan.
So that's where the gray hair comes in. Sometimes
no, but I mean, you've been to the show, man. Yeah.
Well, I must say, I feel very blessed. I had 2 IPOs in the 90s and pitched the second one. Literally the height of the bubble, October 99. We went to a Yankee game after, and they won the World Series. And it was just the whole experience was amazing. Yeah, it was amazing. And then we pitched the secondary during the week when the NASDAQ went haywire. I was in New York pitching like 9 different mutual funds on our secondary. And the NASDAQ fell 500 points in the morning and came almost all the way back by the end of the day. The experience.
Do you remember what the date was or roughly when it was?
It might have been April 5th. It was in April of 2000. What I remember most tellingly, the last meeting we had was at the top of the World Trade Center, may it rest in peace. And it was sort of a murky day outside. And the person who came out to talk to us looked crushed. She had probably her whole job and portfolio die in the morning and then come back to life. And she had absolutely no energy. Hello. I sort of said to myself, back in 1929 when this happened, you could open a window and jump out. World Trade Center, you couldn't open the window, sort of bounce against them, bounce back in. Well, I might as well go back in the market. It was an amazing moment of time. But our offering went. It actually was priced at 25 on Tuesday and actually went out and hit 50 on Friday. The bubble.
Which company was this?
Intertrust. iTrue.
Oh, Intertrust. You guys were the shit. I mean, you were a category king. You were it.
We were it. I'll tell you even a better story. I love this story, even though it's funny, I guess, mocking myself. For a week, Intertrust. So I took the company on the roadshow. We had 1 million of trailing revenue, and we eventually got to a 9 billion market cap. And for 1 week,
those were the days, Duncan. Those were the days.
It's better. For 1 week, we were the most overvalued company in the history of the U.S. stock markets. We were number one. And then at the end of the week, Akamai passed us as even more overvalued. So for 1 week,
do you have the foam number 1 in your office to commemorate this?
When Bitcoin hit 10,000, I was on this panel, and I had been looking feverishly all day to get the Dow 10K hat, which I think I have somewhere. Back in the day. I love it.
Fucking A. Doesn't it feel like a lifetime ago?
It does. It was a wonderful moment. Intertrust went on to become a real company, so I'm proud. I had both my IPOs were real sustainable companies. I'm very proud of that fact. But having lived through the craziness, it was unbelievably fun. I think the people doing blockchain, Bitcoin stuff right now are going through the same crazy experience. And we'll see how it all ends up. I mean, probably 90% or more of the projects will fizzle. But there will be some that build out this wonderful future. And it's wonderful for me to sit down with this group of people, most of them in their 20s or early 30s, and just see the excitement that I was living through back in the days when I used to be 30. It's wonderful to be part of it. It really is wonderful, whatever happens.
And what's it like? Because I know how it is for me, but I'm very curious how it is for you. You know, you're the old man in the room now. right?
Yeah.
And so what's it like to be the master sensei as opposed to the young fighter?
It's fascinating, especially in certain cultures where gray-haired person is actually given a lot of respect. Not so much in Silicon Valley, but it's actually fascinating because I think went through a lot of experiences, and I'd like to impart them to people. So a lot of my time now is trying to teach people what they're about to go through, as opposed to just make a decision and move on. So I spend a lot of time coaching, mentoring, helping people out.
Yeah,
I like it. It's good to give back, and if even a few of these people I'm helping can turn out to create a great company, that would be very, very gratifying.
yeah, yeah. It's I'm sure it was similar for you. I went from feeling like the youngest guy in the room to the oldest guy in the room very quickly.
You talk about a sensei. What you do for companies, I'll tout you again, I think is not just impressive, it's absolutely astounding. The concept you have and what you do, when I've seen you work in a couple of our companies and how you refine their thinking and bring them into the right mission, is just a wonder to behold. And it'd be nice to impart that. I mean, I try to sort of riff on you sometimes, try to impart this to people. They have to think that way. They have to think about how important and big their company could be, and not just how to get through the next month. But of course, you're always mired in a startup with how to make payroll, how to get through the next thing, how to sell the next company, how to raise money for the next people. And you don't usually have the time to pull up, but it's so essential to understand the bigger picture you're going after and have the skills of an Elon Musk to create a whole category out of thin air in an amazing way.
And for people not to realize that Tesla was this close to going away.
Oh, yeah.
Right, yeah. Salesforce was this close to going away, and on and on and on. I mean, so many. They almost all have that story, and so there's this incredible thing in legendary entrepreneurs I've noticed, Duncan, and you have it, which is to be like childly enthusiastic about the future and the opportunity of whatever the fuck it is, and sort of almost have this romantic I'm in love with the thing perspective, and yet at the same time have a profound, brutal relationship with what's going on right now, and that is, hey, if we don't close a sale this week, we don't make payroll, right? And to be simultaneously in love with the opportunity in the future, and yet be grounded enough to like slay the dragon we need to slay right now, and we're on the verge of death a lot, and it just doesn't matter because I'm dealing with this because I'm in love with this over here.
I think that's so well put. I try to tell people that you don't want to raise too much money because you'll get soft. You want to live on the edge the whole time, but not lose sight of the bigger vision. The bigger vision is the mission everybody in the company gravitates around and runs toward, and they understand why they're doing it. So if you get down on vapor, they'll stay with you because they understand the power of where you're going. It's a hard balance, and I think you're right. The really good people know how to do that balance.
Yeah,
motivate the troops, but keep them grounded.
I think that's a lot of what, was so famously called the Jobs distortion field, right? Which was he was in love with his future and he made you in love with his future. And the fact that getting there seemed impossible in the moment was irrelevant to the point. And there's something charming about that, right? It's interesting. We've had a handful of great athletes and Navy SEALs and kind of very high-performing folks on Legends and Losers, and a lot of them refer to visualization, that they close their eyes and they visualize a certain outcome. You talk to professional fighters. We had former UFC champion Luke Rockhold, and he closes his eyes and he visualizes the whole fight. The good, the bad, and the ugly, and how he's going to deal with it, right? And so the fight has been won many, many times in the mind. And so there's this sort of crazy, this future we want is very real for us, right? In spite of the fact that like we're about to be crushed.
No, I agree. I used to play chess, and you have to think forward and then sort of get on your strategy. And when I did computer programming, I would usually envision the whole module before I started coding. I wouldn't just slop through it. And it made it, when I actually was writing it, it went really fast. And so there's something about that ability to visualize the future and then figure out, reverse engineer to the present. I often tell people when they think about how to start a great company, reverse engineer the future. It's like you want to get to the top of Mount Everest, but there's base camps along the way. So visualize where you want to go and then figure out how you march up the mountain. And the first one is not very far away. And get that pathway, not the details, but the pathway figured out. You've reverse engineered the future in effect, and then go race toward it. And the mountain analogy seems to work with people. I borrowed it from somebody else who's really good at giving this sort of perspective. But I think about reverse engineering the future as opposed to building the present and moving forward. Reverse engineer from where you want to end up, and it's a much more powerful way of thinking.
Yeah, my friend Bix Bixen calls that future hacking.
Yeah, very good phrase. I might borrow it.
Yeah,
that's a great phrase. Future hacking.
Yeah, future hacking, and so this is how now he thinks about what he does. And he said, "What? Let me see if I can get this right. What most people do is they stand in the present, looking at their goals out into the future. If you want to hack the future, that is to say, have the future you want to have happen, you stand in the future that you want, and you call the present to it." I think that's how he says it.
Similar visual concept.
Very similar.
You might think of a digital marketplace for a full supply chain, and you visualize what it's got to look like. And then you work back step by step today of what the steps are to get there. Because these things never come out of the fog as a complete battleship. They have to get built step by step. But at least you know where you're going, and you can explain to people what the big vision is. And usually people, when they grasp it, go, holy shit, I want to be part of this. That's the reality distortion field of Steve Jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. And there's a question on my mind. I've been debating whether I should ask it, but I'm going to just fucking ask it. I saw something today, I think, or recently. And I want to say it was on TechCrunch, but I'm not positive. But, it was on one of those kinds of things. And the headline was something like, I hired somebody over the age of 50 in tech, and this is what happened, or something.
I haven't seen that.
And I was like, well, wow, holy fuck. Really? And so I didn't know, or maybe I'm just an idiot. I didn't know that people over 50 in tech were considered that fucking out to pasture. Because I don't feel that way in the world that I'm in. But so I'm just curious. I'm 49. I have personally had no experience of being treated, as Ali G might call, in an ageist way. What's your perspective?
You will be. One more year, it's over.
Yeah, anyway, okay. I'm fucked.
Well, no, basically, revolutions are created by the young, and that's always been true. And that's true in tech. I mean, how old was Steve Jobs? I think when he became a equivalent of a billionaire in 1980 on his IPO, he was younger than Zuck was in 2012 when he became a billionaire. So revolutions are started by the young, and the ageless people have to accept that and embrace it. And at the same time, the youth don't know what they don't know. And so somebody like you can impart incredible wisdom to people and guide them on their path, even if you're not the one actually racing through that path. So I just embrace it. I mean, I got it. I had 4 startups in my day, and I realized that at some point I had aged out of the demographic to run the race. Just accepted it, and now I'm trying to contribute in a whole different way. You may not want to do that, but I do.
So for me, I mean, I hit eject at 38 for the first time. And I thought I was done, and I sort of slid back in and spent, I don't know, probably at least 7 of the last 10 years working with, building the company, and then ultimately the book Play Bigger. So I sort of slid back into working and then kind of re-retired. But so I guess my point is I have no desire to go in and be the revolutionary more. And I understand, to your point, the guys who are fighting in the octagon, and gals for that matter, are not 49 years old. And I think for the well, there can be. I don't hold it against anybody. I have no desire to go do any of that shit anymore. I've been there, done that, been to the show. But the cool thing, to your point, is, to use the fighter analogy, it's like, hey, when you've been in the show and you actually won a couple belts and a thing or two, and then you actually become a decent coach or sensei, to your point, Freddie Roach, the legendary boxing coach, is a pretty fucking cool dude.
Yeah, I would. My perspective on this is you sort of figure out what you want to do for the next 20 years. And you don't have to keep doing what you were doing. You could take every sort of double decade and make something new of yourself. You can reinvent yourself. You don't want to leave the game. A lot of people I know made a lot of money after the dot-com boom. They left the game. And you just don't want to do that. But there's many ways to play the game or pick a different one. And so there's many things you can do with your life. I used to have about a 3 or 5 year clock. My clock slowed down a bit, but I want to do something new and do something new and do something new. So even at 49 to 50, there's nothing that prevents you from doing something new. And being in the game doesn't mean you do it the same way. So whether you're a sensei or a book writer or a podcaster, it doesn't really matter. There's many ways to do it. But I just like to think, what can I contribute the next phase of my life, and then go do it.
Well, and it's funny you say that, because at the core for me with starting Legends and Losers was that, which is, okay, so let's say I'm arrogant enough to say I think I have something to contribute, and participated in writing a book that I'm incredibly proud of. But if the thing that scares me the most is the decline in entrepreneurship. I think it's really bad. I think it's bad for our world. I think it's bad for our people. And I'm somebody for whom entrepreneurship is not a theoretical discussion. I started from nothing, and I've had a miracle of a life. And if you're lucky enough to have been on any kind of a path like that, I don't know. I think it's a natural feeling to say, okay, well, I want to help as many other people have that experience as possible, if that's the experience they think they want to have, or even if they want to consider having that kind of an experience, right? And so, to your point, it's a long answer, I guess, but for me, Legends and Losers was, how do I create a platform for dialogue about having authentic conversation about what it really takes to have a legendary business and a legendary life, and kind of the intersection of those things. And, that's a big ass idea, but I think it's an important conversation. And it was one I wasn't hearing. And it was like all entrepreneurs, it was the show I wanted to listen to.
There you go. Do your own show. I love it. Well, it's a great show. My perspective in this, I think I resonate with your thinking. I work with something called the European Innovation Academy, which is a summer program to like a 3-week accelerator, mostly for students to get the bug to be entrepreneurs. I work with something called Black Box, which is trying to be an accelerator for overseas. People come here, get the DNA, and go home again so they can spread the virus in places like Lebanon or Qatar or something. So I love helping those people. I was working with some people a few years ago on this idea. I think I can't remember what I called it, Seek or something, but it was a accelerator for social good designed to be in Detroit, or not in Ann Arbor, in Detroit, not in Manhattan, maybe in Brooklyn or Queens, and designed to, like an accelerator program, teach people how to create socially good businesses, normal businesses. And I watched how when Colin Kaepernick has done this whole thing in the NFL. And I think what's unfortunate is he never took his initial protest into a mission, into a goal. It was just protest. I did watch when Atlanta allowed this new stadium to get built. They also required the stadium owners or builders or whatever to put a lot of money into the local community to create jobs. I think there's a lot of programs like that we could do, where whether it's an accelerator style or something, but we basically teach people in these areas how to create businesses. We give them financial support, technical support, mentoring, just like we do here in Silicon Valley. But it's not intended to create another Facebook. It's intended to create a very good car service company, or maybe an autonomous driving fleet, or something local. Or maybe in your case, some very good restaurant or very good truck delivery people. And I don't know yet how to get that off the ground. It's still on my head to keep pushing this. But I would love to see more initiatives like that, and I'd participate in them. I think this is how I'm trying to give back right now.
Well, you're of course on my on my heartstring, right? Because the language, the way I think about it is there are big E entrepreneurs, and you're a big E entrepreneur, and I have spent my life around, most of my professional life around them in Silicon Valley, where you get a big idea and create this incredible thing, and you raise all this money, and you go for it, and you go public, and in your case, you're worth $9 billion, and the whole thing, right? Big E entrepreneur. I was never that, although I was in those companies. But I started off at 18 with no other real opportunity other than manual labor, as what you could think of as a small E entrepreneur. No experience, no relationships, no money, no nothing. And yet, me and my buddy Jack, we hang out our shingle and we start going and we start figuring it out, and we get a little help here, a little help there, and we do. And sooner or later, away you go, right? And to your point, my heart is in both places, and I think where our world needs the most help right now is with small E entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I agree. And so I'm still trying to figure out how to help there. Right now I'm doing it globally, but it's really trying to create big E people in places like Lebanon. But the small E thing also tugs at my heartstrings. It needs to be solved.
Yeah. Well, I'm on the team.
Well, I'll come back in touch with you if I get something going. I was making some progress, and I had some potential donors, but it never came together. I think part of it was this last couple of years have been a really crazy whirlwind politically, and so people have been highly distracted by what's going on in the politics, and so it's hard for me to get this thing going. And I'll try again. It's
been a very weird year.
It's been 2 years. It's been a strange period of time. All right. Well, look, it's been fabulous. Hope this has been good for you and helpful to your podcast.
Duncan, you're so awesome. I can't thank you enough. You're an incredible inspiration. You and Paul, you guys were so great to us. Your whole firm has been great to us, helping us with the book. You helped us with so much of our thinking. Rich is amazing. You guys are just, you guys are such a, on the surface, unlikely pairing, right? Is that fair?
It is.
You're a curious group.
Call it eclectic, but there's a huge low level, there's like a long-term level of trust. Needs to serve that eclectic nature notwithstanding. But there is, I think the breadth of our experiences as opposed to similarity has been an enormous factor to our success so far. So eclectic can be good.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I remember when this whole thing started, and Martino was telling me about you guys, and I was like, wow, that let me say it this way. That's a very interesting thing to go do. And to the whole contrarian thing, right? Like it's so fucking you guys are so, anyway, I love you guys, and you've been incredibly kind. All of you made such a big difference with both the development of the ideas and then the development of the book and the marketing of the book. So I can't thank you for that enough. And I love you guys. It's just so great to be around you, and maybe Rich will be next.
You maybe should. Anyway, thank you. And I hope someday I come down to Santa Cruz and hang out in your biker bar, wherever this room is.
You have an unlimited, open, always invitation to come hang out in Santa Cruz with me, and we'll find plenty of things to do to have a good time.
Very good.
Whew. What a conversation. And here's what I'd ask you to think about. Did you hear that little cooing noise right now? That's my dinosaur Beatrice sitting on my lap. So if you're new to Legends and Losers, what you should know is my wife and I have 6 hens. And they're like family members. And every once in a while, one of them likes to come in and hang out for some Legends and Losers. So sitting on my lap for this intro outro with Duncan is the beautiful baby Beatrice. And so if you hear those noises, that's her. Anyway, what if Duncan's right? What if the time we are living in is an explosion in innovation like the late 1800s to early 1900s? What if he's right? Even if you disagree with him, it's interesting to think about. I think I probably do agree with him. My buddy Kevin Maney, who's been on Legends and Losers as well, his book on Scaled is unbelievable. Check out that episode with Kevin if you haven't. They both have a similar idea, which is the cloud in particular catapults us into a time of explosive innovation. And if these guys are right, that that's what's going on, what would you do about it? It's easy to look back on the late 1800s or early 1900s and think, wow, if I'd been around for the commercial adoption of the automobile or electric light or many of the other innovations that came at that time, what could you have done both on a personal level and on a professional level to take advantage of those changes in technologies and exploit them to do good things? Well, that's the question I'd ask you today. If Duncan's right that we're living during this explosion, one of my favorite questions, if we were smart and we were us, if you were smart and you were you, what would you do about it? It's a very provocative, very interesting time to think about these innovations and then play forward 15 to 20 years and think, if I was smart, what would I do right now to exploit IoT, blockchain, the cloud, machine learning, AI, etc.? Yeah, Beatrice is clearly thinking about it as well. So if you love this episode with Duncan as much as I do, why not share it on social media right now? These are some big, important thoughts. Why not email it to a friend of yours who you think might be interested in it? Also, Heather Clancy and I have a new book coming out called Niche Down: How to Be Legendary by Being Different. It's all about figuring out what's the right niche for you. And when you think about it in the context of the new technology, niching down, picking a niche that you can dominate, and then doing that at scale is really the opportunity in technology. So if you would like a free preview teaser of Niche Down, do the following. Write a review of Legends and Losers wherever you experience podcasts. Take a copy of that review, email it to blackhole@legendsandlosers.com, and we will email you a free preview white paper of the book Niche Down as soon as we get that email from you at blackhole@legendsandlosers.com. We'd also love it if you subscribed on our website, legendsandlosers.com. And if you're a Facebook person, we have a Facebook group, and it'd be cool if you joined us there. All right. We would like to thank our good friends at Bullpen Capital. Check them out, bullpen.com. Turbocharge your growth at netsuite.com/legends. NetSuite is the all-in-one cloud platform for running your business, from your financials, your accounts receivable, your inventory, and your e-commerce. Turbocharge your growth at netsuite.com/legends. HarperCollins Instant Classic, Play Bigger: How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. Pick up a copy today. Equity Directory. If you're in the startup ecosystem, we need you to get on equitydirectory.com. That's where great startups connect with great talent who are willing to work primarily for equity to build a legendary business. Check us out today on this internet at equitydirectory.com. One of my favorite nonprofits, founded by my good friend and guest, Tim Rode, onelifefullylived.org. The nonprofit helping you dream, plan, and live your best life for as close to free as possible. We have incredible resources. We have amazing events we do around the country. Check it out, onelifefullylived.org. A podcast I love with my dear friend Jamie J., the nicest man in podcasting. Check out Stop Riding the Pine. Jamie J., Stop Riding the Pine. The official coffee of Legends and Losers is Verve Coffee Roasters, right here in beautiful Santa Cruz, California, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Tokyo, and always at vervecoffee.com. Check it out. You will love it. Pursuingresults.com. They produce legendary podcasts, and they even produce this one. Check out pursuingresults.com. And if you're a thought leader, get your leading thoughts on podcasts. Check out interviewvalet.com. Podcast interview marketing. You be the guest, and they will do the rest. A best-selling book that we love, No Barriers: A Blind Man's Journey to Kayak the Grand Canyon, by our friend and guest on episode 47, Eric Weinmeier. And another podcast that we love, The Jordan Harbinger Show. Check out The Jordan Harbinger Show with our friend and guest on episode 135, Jordan Harbinger. And don't forget, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're working at a startup, check out growwire.com. All right, we need to remind you that this oddcast is a sole property of the Legends and Losers Oddcast Network, and we would love you just a little bit extra if you shared the shit out of it right now. We also must warn you that all rights do remain disturbed, All Legends and Losers episodes do contain nuts. The producers of this podcast might have been consuming libations. Remember to call your mother. Beware of pre-eye in the passing lane. In the case of bullshit interview shows, take 2 Legends and Losers and tweet us in the morning. Be a podcast legend yourself. Why not introduce 2 people you love to 2 podcasts you love? There are over 500,000 podcasts. And new people who are interested in podcasts sometimes find hard to find their podcast app, check out a podcast. So why not hook up one of your friends today, introduce them to a podcast you love. Don't forget, there's no stopping the cretins from hopping. And today, our deepest apologies go out to Equifax CEO Richard Smith. Sorry, Dick, we just ran out of time for you. That's it, my friends. Love you, Mom and Dad. This podcast really ties the room together, doesn't it, Colin? And we're out of here. Be legendary, my friends, and we'll see you again soon on another episode of Legends and Losers.